From prayers to backlash, celebrity reactions on Charlie Kirk's death. What happens when tragedy strikes one of the most polarizing figures in American politics? Among the most divisive cultural events of 2025 was the unexpected passing of Charlie Kirk, a well-known conservative activist and the founder of Turning Point USA. Kirk was killed in front of a live audience on September 10th while giving a speech at Utah Valley University. In addition to taking the life of a well-known political person, the horrifying crime sparked a flurry of emotional responses, both inside and outside of the U.S. public figures. Politicians and celebrities swiftly voiced their opinions, and their reactions, which range from fervent prayers to scathing criticism, have brought attention to the profound divisions in American culture. The discourse quickly changed in the hours following the shooting. Initially, there was a flood of condolences, many of which were based on sadness and religion. But shortly after, discussions broke out over the significance of Kirk's life, how his legacy ought to be remembered, and whether his passing represented more significant issues facing the nation. It is evident from examining these responses that this tragedy is about more than just the death of one guy. It also represents the larger fight for free speech, polarization, and the human cost of political warfare. Celebrities' initial reactions were characterized by grief, incredulity, and requests for prayer. One of the first people to express sympathy for Kirk's family online was actor Chris Pratt. In his letter, he prayed for Kirk's wife, kids, and the country as a whole, pleading with God to use His grace to guide Americans through these trying times. Pratt's message struck a chord with many people, not only because of his religious perspective, but also because it addressed the individual and societal aspects of grief. In a similar vein, actress Candace Cameron Bure paid homage to Kirk by describing him as a good and faithful servant and using language infused with biblical references. Her remarks were in line with a larger theme that pervaded many tributes: Kirk's Christian identity and the conviction that his faith influenced his life and work. Known for their close conservative ties, Jason and Brittany Aldean also released remarks that focused on his position as a father and spouse, characterizing him as a brave guy who motivated people with his convictions. Not every homage was solely a celebration of his legacy. For example, actress Jamie Lee Curtis provided a more nuanced perspective. She underlined the significance of acknowledging Kirk's humanity, even while she acknowledged that she strongly disagreed with many of his political views. Curtis talked about his identity as a devout man and expressed her hope that Kirk felt spiritually connected in his last moments. The intricacy of grieving a divisive individual was encapsulated in this attempt to strike a balance between honesty and empathy. Sorrow for the life lost, balanced by recognition of ideological differences. The incident swiftly gained wider relevance for pundits who cared about democracy and public debate. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the former governor of California, responded by addressing the growing differences in the country. He exhorted Americans to find their better angels and characterized politics as a disease that had turned lethal. For Schwarzenegger, Kirk's passing represented the perils of viewing opponents as adversaries and depending on violence rather than reason. Stephen Colbert, a late-night host, also spent time talking about the murder on The Late Show. Colbert denounced the incident as a horrific attack on civic life, despite his frequent criticism of Kirk's politics. He cautioned that using violence against those who had opposing views was a dangerous change in the political landscape that would undermine the fundamental tenets of free speech and discussion. This framing was repeated by British journalist Piers Morgan, who described the assassination as an appalling assault on free speech and democracy. When taken as a whole, these answers reveal an important theme. For many, Kirk's passing was not only a personal tragedy, but also a cautionary tale about the brittleness of public discourse in a country that is becoming more and more divided. However, in the midst of the sorrow and appeals for solidarity, there were instances of debate and backlash that demonstrated how split the public still is. Some people on the internet responded to the shooter's acts with laughter or even celebration. People like professional golfer Phil Mickelson expressed their displeasure over this, saying he was horrified to see people celebrating Kirk's death. He said that the responses made him lose faith in people and referred to them as disgusting. From TMZ's newsroom came another dispute. Applause and laughter were apparently heard on a live feed just prior to Kirk's death being revealed by the outlet. The The response was widely condemned by viewers who saw it as disrespectful and insensitive. The optics raised questions about how certain media outlets handle delicate news in a hyper-partisan setting, regardless of whether the laughter had anything to do with the tragedy. There were also disagreements about how to present Kirk's legacy. Some cited his history of divisive speech, especially on LGBTQ+ issues, while others praised him as a devout Christian leader and supporter of conservative youth. Kristin Chenoweth, an actress, was entangled in this controversy. Despite posting a message of grief at first, she eventually came under fire from LGBTQ+ people who believed her remembrance minimized the suffering they connected to Kirk's efforts. Eventually, Chenoweth gave an explanation for her comments, confirming her personal beliefs and admitting the hurt her words caused. Lastly, a number of people, including former President Barack Obama, stressed that Kirk's passing ought to provoke a discussion about the larger culture of political violence. Obama said that such violence has no place in a functioning democracy and denounced the incident as despicable. Among the deluge of comments, certain famous remarks attracted special notice. For instance, actor Charlie Sheen was clearly taken aback when he learned of Kirk's passing during a live podcast with Joe Rogan. Rogan took advantage of the opportunity to consider Kirk's openness to conversing with those who held different opinions from him, pointing out that his public speaking engagements frequently took him into hostile environments where communication was nevertheless feasible. Jamie Lee Curtis's message, which is already renowned for its subtlety, has received a lot of respect for being a unique instance of moral honesty and empathy. Meghan McCain, on the other hand, used her response to make a political statement, saying that violence will not be used to quiet conservatives. Kirk's passing represented for her tenacity in the face of adversity. Elon Musk also voiced his opinion, calling the actions of individuals who applauded the assassination evil and denouncing them. Musk maintained that condoning or lauding such violence posed a danger to civilization as a whole. Rosie O'Donnell, who frequently criticizes conservative personalities, came out against the murder without reservation, emphasizing that no ideology could ever justify murder. These varied replies are connected by a number of themes. First, many tributes focused heavily on faith and religion, which reflected Kirk's public persona as a Christian leader. The widespread use of prayer language demonstrates how, despite criticism, religion continues to be a potent lens through which to see national tragedy. Second, the assassination refocused attention on polarization and free expression. Kirk's passing was interpreted by many as evidence that American politics has become dangerously hot. People of all political persuasions were worried by the notion that public speaking could be fatal. Third, the responses highlight the harm that political violence causes to democracy. Regardless of whether one liked Kirk or not, it was widely acknowledged that violence chills people and stifles discussion. Responses from prominent figures such as Obama, Colbert, and Schwarzenegger echoed this worry. Fourth, tribute criticism shows how reputations are still challenged after death. Supporters saw Kirk as a moral conservative defender, while enemies saw him as a combative person whose comments had real consequences. The battle over his legacy shows how hard it is to separate politics and grief during such a contentious time. Finally, the responses demonstrate media duty's growing scrutiny. The TMZ scandal shows that reporting tone can evoke strong emotions. In a time where stories spread instantly online, every facet of coverage contributes to cultural tension. Some responses have been negative. Kristin Chenoweth's first speech, meant as an homage, showed how fast condolences linked with troublesome people may be mocked. The TMZ incident shows how quickly the public judges media coverage of tragedies. Some analysts and pundits have been accused of using the tragedy for political gain, presenting Kirk's death as evidence of an existential clash with conservatives, risks exacerbating the rifts that generated the poisonous atmosphere. Free speech concerns are valid, but some argue that leveraging the tragedy in a culture war is harmful. Kirk's death highlights political and societal factors beyond personal responses. His wife, Erica Kirk, called the tragedy a spiritual war between good and evil. Christian nationalists who have martyred Kirk support this position. The martyrdom story raises important issues about memorializing and symbolizing the dead. Supporters focus on Kirk's murder, while opponents worry about how sadness might be politicized. Modern culture's extremes are shown by internet comments, from nasty jubilation to heartfelt sorrow. The shooting's extensive conspiracy theories have muddled public debate. Hatred and empathy have returned to the internet, formerly a wellspring of information. Everything hinges on the urgent question: is free speech under danger? Regardless of politics, many find it worrisome that a public speaker could be slain for their views. It indicates that civic society must work to allow dissent without violence, and that democratic standards are fragile. Despite the conversation, many questions remain. Investigators are still trying to determine Tyler Robinson's motive. Although ideological resistance is suspected, the complete picture is unknown. The online response's extent is another matter. Social media has enhanced tales about individuals celebrating Kirk's death, but it's unclear if this is a cultural trend. Another challenge is balancing criticism and empathy. Can prominent personalities condole with a controversial figure who died violently without upsetting their communities or condoning harmful speech? It's unlikely this tension will end. Finally, Kirk's death may not impact anything long-term. Will new rules protect public speakers? Will it alter national discourse? Will it be forgotten as another violent and divided tragedy? If you're finding this breakdown helpful, don't forget to hit subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss the latest updates.